The night my grandmother's curse finally found me, I was standing alone in her old house, clutching a faded love letter that smelled of dust and roses long dead. The air was heavy, too heavy for my chest, and the candlelight flickered even though there was no wind. Then I heard it, her voice. "Don't open it, don't let it in," she whispered. I froze. She'd been gone for 10 years, buried under the willow tree at the edge of the village. But there she was, her voice trembling, echoing through the same walls where she once cooked me soup and told me bedtime stories. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. The ink faded but still alive, still breathing. The words were not just written. They were etched in something darker, something that pulsed like a heartbeat. The room grew colder, the shadows stretched, and I swore I saw someone standing at the edge of the doorway. Tall, faceless, watching me. That was the moment I realized. I had not only inherited my grandma's story of love, I had inherited her curse. But before you understand what that means, before you see how her love became my nightmare, let me take you back to where it all began, with my grandmother, Mary, the kindest woman who ever lived, and the secret she carried that no one in our family dared to speak of. When Grandma was young, people used to say she had the sort of beauty that turned heads and broke hearts. But beauty like that can be dangerous, especially when it attracts the wrong kind of love. And for Grandma, love came in the form of a man who wasn't supposed to be hers. His name was Richard, a tall man with dark hair and a smile that made women blush. But Richard was already promised to another woman, a wealthy one. Yet he and my grandma couldn't stay apart. Their love was like fire. Wild, forbidden, burning brighter the more people tried to put it out. They met in secret, under the willow tree, the same one where Grandma now rests. She always said that tree had seen everything, from her happiest kiss to her darkest tear. But what she didn't know was that the tree saw more than just her love. It saw the anger of the woman Richard betrayed. That woman, filled with jealousy, went to someone dark, someone people in the village only spoke about in whispers. They said she was a woman who dealt with shadows, who could make curses crawl through bloodlines like snakes in the grass. And she cursed my grandmother's love. The curse was simple but cruel. Anyone who carried that love would also carry suffering. It would not end with Grandma. It would pass on, down and down, until it reached me. For years, Grandma tried to hide it. She lived with Richard in secret, until he was forced to leave her for the woman his family wanted. Heartbroken but proud, Grandma raised her children alone. She worked, she prayed, she told stories. But every now and then, when she thought no one was watching, she'd cry under the willow tree. And sometimes when I was a little boy, I'd hear her whisper words that weren't English, words that sounded old, words that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I didn't understand then. But now I do. Because on the night she died, she pressed my hand and told me, "Be careful with love. It is beautiful but it carries teeth. Never read the letters, child. Promise me." Promised. But promises are hard to keep when curiosity pulls you like a rope around your neck. After she passed, the house was locked up, left to gather dust. But last winter when I had nowhere else to stay, I returned. That was when I found the letters, hidden in a box under her bed. Letters from Richard. Love letters that bled with passion and pain. And when I read the first one, that was when things began. The whispers. The cold. The shadows. The feeling that Grandma's story wasn't finished, that it had spilled into me. At first I thought it was all in my head. But then on the third night in that house, something knocked on the door. Slow. Heavy. 3 times. When I opened it, no one was there. Only the smell of roses, sharp and suffocating, like they'd been rotting in the dark. I slammed the door shut, heart racing, and that was when I saw it, the figure in the mirror. It wasn't me. It was Richard, young, handsome, smiling and bleeding from the chest. And then I heard it again. My grandmother's voice. "Don't open it. Don't let it in." But it was too late. Because by opening those letters, by stepping into her story, I had already invited the curse inside. And that night, as the shadows grew darker, I realized the curse wasn't just about her love. It was about mine too. And that's when the first scream came, from inside the house, even though I was alone. The scream tore through the silence of the house, sharp and raw, like someone being pulled apart. It came from the kitchen, though I knew I was alone. My chest tightened, and the candle in my hand flickered so violently that melted wax spilled onto my fingers. The pain was real, hot and stinging, which told me one thing. This was no dream. I wanted to run, I swear I did, but my legs froze like they had been nailed to the old wooden floor. The scream came again, louder this time, shaking the pots and pans hanging from the kitchen hooks. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was so heavy, so crushing. I could hear the thud of my heartbeat in my ears. "Grandma!" I whispered, my throat dry. No answer. I forced my legs to move one step at a time toward the kitchen. The floor creaked under me like it was warning me to turn back. But I pushed forward. The closer I got, the colder it became, until my breath was a pale cloud in front of me. When I finally reached the doorway, I saw nothing at first. Just the moonlight spilling in through the cracked window, the stove covered in dust, the table where Grandma used to serve me warm bread. But then I saw it. On the floor, just under the table, was a trail of something dark. First, I thought it was water. Then the smell hit me. Iron. Thick. Metallic. Blood. The trail led from the table to the pantry door, which was half open. My hands trembled as I held up the candle and inched closer. The shadows inside the pantry seemed to move, like they were breathing. My throat closed up, but I forced myself to whisper, "Who's there?" Silence. I reached for the door, pushing it open wider, and the candlelight spilled into the tiny room. Nothing. Empty shelves. Old jars. Dust. And then, just as I turned to step away, a whisper brushed against my ear. "Why did you open it?" I spun around, dropping the candle. Darkness swallowed me whole. I scrambled on the floor, patting the wood for the candle, but the whisper came again, this time from behind me. "You should have left it closed." I bolted out of the kitchen, heart pounding, and ran up the stairs 2 at a time, slamming my bedroom door shut. My body shook as I pressed my back against it, listening for footsteps. But there were none. Only the sound of the wind against the windows, whistling like someone crying far away. I don't know how long I stayed there, hugging my knees in the dark, but eventually my eyelids grew heavy. Fear does that sometimes. It exhausts you until your body forces you to rest. When I woke up, the sun was shining faintly through the curtains, and for a moment, I convinced myself it had all been a nightmare. But when I went downstairs, the trail of blood was gone. The kitchen floor was spotless, as if someone had scrubbed it clean overnight. The candle I dropped wasn't there either. It was as if nothing had happened. I wanted to leave the house that morning. I really did. But something inside me kept me there. Part fear, part curiosity, and part of me that wanted answers about the curse. Grandma had lived here all her life, carrying the weight of that dark story. If I ran now, wouldn't I just be letting it chase me forever? No, I told myself. I needed to face it. So I stayed. The day passed quietly, almost too quietly. I tried distracting myself by cleaning the house, sweeping dust from corners, opening windows to let fresh air in. Each time I passed her room, I felt a heaviness pressing against my chest, like the air itself didn't want me to open that door. I avoided it. For now. Later in the afternoon, I went out to the garden where the willow tree stood. Its long branches swayed in the wind, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I remembered sitting under that tree as a child, Grandma humming softly as she braided my hair or told me stories of her youth. She never spoke of Richard directly, but she would sometimes look up at the branches with tears in her eyes. Now, standing there alone, I felt the same sadness. But beneath it, I felt something else. A presence. Like someone was watching me from the other side of the tree. "Hello," I called. The branches swayed harder, though there was no wind. I took a step closer, and that's when I saw it, carved into the bark of the tree. A heart, with 2 letters inside. M+R. Mary and Richard. My chest tightened. I reached out to touch it, but the moment my fingers brushed the rough bark, the ground under me seemed to groan. I stumbled back, and for just a second, I swore I saw a shadow of a man leaning against the tree, smiling at me. I ran back inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every brush of wind against the windows kept me awake. Around midnight, I heard footsteps upstairs, slow and heavy. My body froze in bed, but I forced myself to whisper, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a knock. 3 sharp knocks on my door. I pulled the blanket over my head, heart racing so hard I thought it might burst. The knocking came again, louder. Then a voice, soft but clear. "Let me in." It wasn't Grandma's voice this time. It was a man's. Smooth, calm, almost charming. But underneath it was something wrong, something that made my skin crawl. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stayed under the blanket, praying. The knocking stopped. Morning came again, and with it the illusion of safety. But I knew the curse wasn't sleeping. It was waiting. I decided I needed to know more about Richard. Who he really was, what kind of man could inspire love so deep, and yet bring so much destruction. I went to the attic, where Grandma had kept boxes of old things. Inside one, I found a stack of photographs. Faded black and white pictures of her as a young woman. In many of them, she was smiling beside a man I assumed was Richard. He was handsome, yes, but there was something unsettling about his eyes. Even in a photograph, they seemed to follow me, dark and hollow, as if he knew I was looking at him decades later. At the bottom of the box was a diary. My hands shook as I opened it, the pages yellow and fragile. Grandma's handwriting filled each page, neat and small. I read in silence, my heart sinking with every line. She wrote about their secret meetings, about the joy of holding him under the willow tree, about the pain of knowing he could never truly be hers. She wrote about the whispers in the village, the anger of the woman he was promised to. And then she wrote about the curse. The woman said my love would never rest. One entry read, "She said my children and their children would feel the shadow of what I chose." I don't know if I believe her, but at night I hear things. Sometimes I feel Richard is here, watching me. Sometimes I think the curse is real. I closed the diary, my hands sweating. She had known. She had carried this fear all her life, and now it had fallen to me. That night, I made a mistake. I burned one of the letters. I thought maybe, if I destroyed them, the curse would weaken. I placed it in the fireplace and watched the paper curl and blacken, the words turning to ash. For a moment I felt relief. Then the house shook. The windows rattled, the lights flickered, and a scream tore through the walls, this time louder than ever, shaking the glass until it cracked. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, but the scream was inside me, filling my head, pressing against my skull like it would split open. And then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse, because when I opened my eyes I wasn't in the house anymore. I was under the willow tree. At night. Alone. The branches swayed above me, and the heart carved into the bark glowed faintly. I turned in a panic, and there he was. Richard. Standing just a few feet away, smiling. His eyes were black, his chest bleeding, and yet he stood tall, reaching out a hand toward me. "Now you carry it," he whispered. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat locked. My body refused to move. He stepped closer, and I saw Grandma behind him, her face pale, her eyes full of sorrow. She shook her head at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. And then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the house, lying flat on the cold wooden floor. My chest rose and fell like I had been drowning, and sweat poured down my face as though I had been running for miles. For a long moment I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had gone mad, if the curse had finally snapped my mind in two. But then I saw it. My hand. It was covered in dirt, damp, black soil, the kind that clung only to the ground outside beneath the willow tree. My fingernails were filled with it, as though I had been clawing at the earth. That's when I knew I hadn't dreamed it. I had been out there. Somehow, without walking, without opening a single door, I had been taken outside to the tree where Richard stood waiting for me. I scrambled to my feet, every bone in me shaking, and stumbled to the sink. I turned on the tap, splashing water onto my face, but when I looked up into the mirror above the sink, I nearly fainted. It wasn't just me in the reflection. Richard was there too. He stood behind me, his dark eyes fixed on mine, his smile sharp as broken glass. Blood poured down his chest like a river, staining the front of his shirt, but he didn't look weak. He looked powerful, like the blood made him stronger. I spun around, but the kitchen was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, he was gone. I sank to the floor, hugging my knees. My breath came in shallow gasps, and the words Grandma had whispered on her deathbed repeated in my head. "Be careful with love. It is beautiful, but it carries teeth." Never read the letters, child. Promise me. I had broken the promise. I had unleashed the curse. And now it was inside me. I needed help. But who could I tell? Who would believe me if I said my dead grandmother's lover was haunting me? I thought about calling a priest, but shame held me back. What if they laughed? What if they thought I was insane? No, I decided. I would go to the only person who might understand, old Mrs. Collins, the neighbor who had lived beside Grandma for 50 years. The next morning, I walked across the narrow path that separated our houses. Her front yard was filled with roses, though most of them had withered in the winter cold. I knocked on her door, and after a long pause she opened it, her eyes squinting at me. She was a small woman, bent with age, but her gaze was sharp as a knife. "You look just like Mary when she was scared," she said before I even spoke. The words froze me. "What do you mean?" I asked. She stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. The house smelled of herbs and something burning in a pot. "Your grandmother carried something heavy," Mrs. Collins said as I sat down. "I told her many times to leave that man alone, but love makes fools of us all." I leaned forward. "You know about Richard?" Her eyes flickered with something, fear maybe. Everyone knew about Richard. But only some of us knew the other side. He wasn't just a man. There was something dark in him. Something that clung to your grandmother even after he left her. Some of us thought he was cursed. Some of us thought he was the curse. I swallowed hard. "He's still here. With me. I see him." She didn't look surprised. Instead, she reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Then it's true. The curse passed to you." I felt tears sting my eyes. "How do I stop it?" She shook her head slowly. "You don't stop it. You survive it. And you never, ever let him in." Her words made my stomach twist. Never let him in. That's exactly what Grandma had whispered. That's exactly what the voice at my door had said. Let me in. But how long could I keep him out? That night back in Grandma's house, I tried everything I could think of. I locked every door. I closed every window. I placed salt in front of the doors, something I had read in a book once. Then I sat in the living room with every light turned on, waiting, my eyes refusing to close. First it was quiet. Too quiet. Hours ticked by, the old clock on the wall clicking with each second, the only sound in the room. My eyelids grew heavy, and I was just about to drift off when the lights began to flicker. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. The air grew colder, sharp enough to sting my skin. Then came the sound, footsteps slow and deliberate, moving across the floor upstairs. I clutched the edge of the chair, my knuckles white. "No, iwisparat. Not tonight. Please, not tonight." The footsteps stopped. Silence. And then in the hallway just beyond the living room I saw him. Richard. He stood there, tall and shadowed, his smile stretched too wide, his eyes black pits that swallowed the light. His chest still bled, the blood dripping onto the floor though it made no sound when it landed. He lifted his hand and pointed at me. "You're mine now," he said, his voice smooth, almost gentle, but filled with something that made my bones ache. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. All I could do was sit there, frozen, as he took a step forward. Then another. And then the lights went out. The darkness swallowed me whole. 1 second there had been light, weak and flickering, but still a comfort. The next, there was nothing. Only blackness, thick and suffocating, pressing against my skin like a living thing. My heart pounded so loudly it filled my ears, and every muscle in my body trembled with the urge to run, though I couldn't see where. "Don't fight it," Richard's voice purred through the darkness. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. Inside the walls, inside my head, crawling down my spine. "You opened the letters. You called me back. You carry her love, and now you carry me." I stumbled backward, hands outstretched, trying to find the wall, the chair, anything solid that could anchor me. My fingers brushed against wood and I clung to it. "You're not real," I whispered, though my voice cracked with fear. "You're just a shadow. Just a memory." The air shifted, colder now, so cold that each breath I took felt like knives in my lungs. "If I'm only a memory," he said, his voice suddenly behind me, "then why do you feel my breath on your neck?" I spun around, but of course there was nothing. Only the dark. My legs nearly gave way, and I sank to my knees, whispering prayers I hadn't said since I was a child. Our Father who art in heaven. A low chuckle rolled through the house, mocking cruel. Prayers won't save you. Mary tried. She prayed every night. But love that deep cannot be erased by holy words. It lingers. It binds. And now it binds you. I wanted to cover my ears to block him out, but even that wouldn't stop the sound. It wasn't just outside, it was inside me, curling into my thoughts. Then the floorboards creaked. Slowly. One step. Another. The sound was getting closer, circling me in the black. I shut my eyes, though it made no difference, and held my breath. And then I felt it, fingers brushing my cheek. Cold, damp, leaving trails of ice on my skin. My eyes shot open, and though the room was dark, I could see him now as clear as day. Richard's face was inches from mine, his smile wide, his eyes endless black voids. Blood dripped steadily down his chest, staining the floor beneath us, though no sound came from it. Say my name, he whispered. I shook my head violently, pressing myself back against the wall. Say it, he insisted, his voice rising, echoing through the walls until the whole house seemed to roar with him. Say it and let me in. No. I screamed, finally finding my voice. You're not mine. You never were. The room shook with anger. The windows rattled. The ceiling groaned as though it might collapse. Richard's smile faded, replaced by a sneer of pure rage. For a moment, I thought he would tear me apart right there. But instead he vanished. The lights flickered back on, casting the room in a sickly yellow glow. The chair was overturned. The floorboards were damp, streaked with something dark that smelled like blood. My body shook so violently I could barely stand, but I forced myself to my feet. I couldn't stay here. If I stayed, he would win. I grabbed my coat and ran out the door into the freezing night. The air outside felt fresher, safer, but even then I couldn't shake the feeling that he was right behind me, watching from the shadows. My feet carried me down the path, past the garden, past the willow tree whose branches reached out like arms. I didn't stop until I reached the village church. The doors were locked, but I banged on them with both fists until my knuckles ached. At last, the door opened, and Father Thomas, the old priest, peered out with tired eyes. What on earth? I need help, I gasped. Please, Father. It's my grandmother's house. Something's there. Something evil. He studied me for a long moment, then ushered me inside. The warmth of the church wrapped around me, but it didn't ease the trembling in my bones. I told him everything, about Grandma, about Richard, about the letters, the curse, the figure in the mirror, the screams, the willow tree. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long time, his hands folded tightly. Finally, he said, I warned your grandmother once. Love is a gift, but it can become a chain. She never listened. I frowned. You knew. He nodded. Everyone knew Mary's story. But I saw what it did to her. I saw the shadows in her eyes, the way she looked over her shoulder even in broad daylight. I tried to help her, but she refused. She said she would carry it herself. But now it's mine, I whispered, tears burning in my eyes. It's killing me, Father. He's killing me. The priest stood, his back straight despite his age. Then we will try again. Come tomorrow. I will bless the house. But you must be strong. Evil feeds on fear. If you give in, it will take you. I nodded, though strength was the last thing I felt. That night, I stayed in the church. I curled up on a pew, clutching a Bible like it was the only thing keeping me alive. I drifted in and out of sleep, haunted by dreams of Richard standing in the aisle, blood dripping down the altar steps, his voice whispering, You can't hide from love. When dawn came, I felt hollow, but alive. Father Thomas and I walked back to Grandma's house together. The morning was gray, the sky heavy with clouds. As we approached, the house loomed dark and still, the windows like watching eyes. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Father Thomas sprinkled holy water in each room, murmuring prayers under his breath. I followed him, clutching the diary I had found in the attic. The words inside burned in my mind, especially the final entry. If he ever returns, tell them not to let him in. Promise me. When we reached the living room, Father Thomas paused. The air was colder there, sharper, and the smell of roses, sickly sweet, overwhelming, filled the room. He tightened his grip on the cross in his hand. "He's here," the priest said softly, and then the lights went out again. The house trembled and the familiar scream ripped through the walls louder than before, so loud I thought the windows would shatter. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me, rattling my bones. Father Thomas raised his cross high, his voice booming with prayer, but suddenly he was thrown backward, as if struck by invisible hands. He hit the wall with a sickening thud and crumpled to the floor. I screamed his name, but he didn't move. And then in the center of the room Richard appeared. Not just a shadow this time. He was solid, his body tall and strong, though blood poured endlessly from the wound in his chest. His eyes locked onto mine and his smile returned. "You can't run," he said softly. "You are me now." The air grew so cold I could see my breath, my lungs burning with each gasp. My vision blurred, and my knees buckled under the weight of his presence. And then he reached out his hand. "Take it," he whispered. "Take my hand, and we will finish what your grandmother started." My body trembled. My mind screamed to refuse. But my hand lifted, shaking, inching toward his. I don't know if it was fear or the curse pulling me, but I felt my fingers about to touch his when the diary in my pocket burst into flames. The diary burned in my hands like it was alive, its flames bright though no match or candle had touched it. Richard's smile twisted into a snarl as the fire spread, filling the room with a light so fierce it cut through the shadows. The house shook violently, the walls groaning, the floorboards cracking under the weight of something ancient being forced out. Richard staggered back, his outstretched hand curling into a fist. His voice, once smooth and calm, now tore through the air like thunder. "You cannot erase love," he screamed. "It binds forever. Blood to blood, soul to soul." But the flames grew brighter, and in them I saw her. My grandmother. Mary. She stood in the fire, her face calm, her eyes no longer filled with sorrow but with strength. She reached toward me, not Richard, her voice soft and steady. "You kept your promise in the end," she whispered. "You fought. You resisted. And now, child, it ends with me." Richard's form twisted, his features melting into shadows, his body stretching like smoke fighting against the wind. He screamed her name, screamed mine, but the fire swallowed him whole. His shadow shattered into nothing, leaving only silence behind. The diary crumbled into ash, the last link between him and us destroyed. I collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down my face, my chest heaving with exhaustion. Father Thomas stirred in the corner, groaning but alive. The air in the house was different now, lighter, free. For the first time since I had arrived, I felt I could breathe. I left the house that morning and never returned. The willow tree still stands, its branches swaying gently in the wind, but now it feels like a guardian instead of a witness. I visit sometimes, laying flowers at its roots, whispering thanks to Grandma for protecting me even in death. The curse did not win, but it left scars. From my grandmother's story, I learned the most painful lesson of all. Love is powerful, but love that is stolen, hidden, or twisted can destroy generations. It can turn beauty into sorrow, passion into chains, memory into haunting. I inherited my grandma's love story, and nearly her curse. But I also inherited her courage. To anyone who hears this story, remember: be careful where you plant your love. Be careful who you give your heart to, because love is not only a gift, can also be a ghost. And ghosts do not rest easily.